Hey everyone, and welcome to my review of Daredevil Born Again, episodes 3 and 4. There will be spoilers, so go ahead and watch the episodes and come back, unless you really don't care, and to be honest, I don't think I'd recommend these episodes anyway. I'm going to split this video up into good and bad, so let's get the bad out of the way first. Obviously, at the end of episode 2, Matt's basically just beaten up two police officers nearly to death who were chasing the witness from the station. It seemed as though he could have even killed them, but as this episode starts, basically nothing's happened from it. Matt and the cop who didn't have his arm broken are still working and involved in the case. No one knows about anything that happened. They do have a conversation about what happened where they both threaten each other with exposing the truth, but obviously neither of them do it because they both have things to hide. I don't know how the cops haven't been questioned on why or how they got a black eye and a broken arm while off duty in the middle of this big case that one of them's heavily involved in, to be honest, but hey ho. Speaking of the case, let's talk about that. So, the whole of episode 3 was essentially in the courtroom, and don't get me wrong, some of the courtroom stuff was okay, and it was definitely better than the jokes of courtroom scenes that appeared in She-Hulk. It actually felt like they were trying with some of the scenes in this show, but there was some stuff that made absolutely no sense. First off, the attack happened on a subway station in New York. Surely there'd have been CCTV footage of the platform, which, even if it didn't catch the attack, surely it would have caught the fact that there was someone else on the platform, which they lied about during the testimony. Not once was the CCTV even mentioned in the courtroom. Second, Matt decides to tell the courtroom and the world that Hector Ayala is the White Tiger after the witness Nikki Torres lied about the story on the stand. Now, think about it. Matt has been hiding this other part of himself from the world for most of his adult life and would hate someone to tell his secret without his consent, but he goes ahead and does the exact same thing to Hector. The Matt from the Netflix show, I don't think, would have ever done this. He would have found another way or at least spoken to Hector first. There was also the fact that Hector was found not guilty on all charges, including manslaughter. When there was no evidence provided against the manslaughter charge, even Hector's story would likely have led to a manslaughter charge with the way he described it. So for it to not even be mentioned throughout the trial and then be found not guilty is just ridiculous. Now, Hector gets set free at the end of episode 3, after obviously being found not guilty, and we see him suiting up, putting on the amulet, and getting out in the streets again as White Tiger, the first time we properly see him do that. We see him walking down the street, not the most effective method of travel, if I'm honest, and then suddenly he gets shot in the head by someone wearing a Punisher logo. I'll talk more about that in a moment, but for a second, I know the actor who played Hector sadly passed away recently from cancer in December, rest in peace, so obviously there was a limited amount that they could do with the character moving forward, but it just seemed like such a waste of a character with how they dealt with it. We pretty much don't find anything out about his powers other than the fact that he gets them from his amulet, and all we see of him is a character at the initial fight with the cops, and then the courtroom drama for an episode before he gets shot in the head. Maybe the rest of the footage they had from him didn't really fit the reworked story of the show after the reshoots, but it just seemed like a waste of both a decent character who was acted well, as well as a waste of time in the show at this stage. We spent a whole episode on the case just for him to get shot in the head, and we move on. Considering this season's going to be shorter than the Netflix shows were, I feel like they could have used the time more effectively. Going back to the shooting, as I mentioned, Hector was shot by a man wearing a Punisher logo who was hiding behind a bin or something. But we find out in episode 4 for definite that it wasn't Frank who killed him, meaning that there are copycats out now operating in New York. They're most likely going to be the cops from the subway fight and their mates, seeing as one of them had a Punisher tattoo on his wrist, which we saw during the fight with Matt. I'm sure we'll see more of them moving forward, but I feel like they could have figured out another way to introduce them without wasting a couple of episodes on the White Tiger character, who we didn't really learn much about and now won't see again. Moving on to Fisk, and Fisk is starting to realise that he can't just ignore the red tape on projects in the city when he's mayor. Obviously, he did that earlier in the season with the potholes on the road, bypassing all the red tape and just telling them to fix it, which is highly irresponsible and could cause major issues on the road. But then he tried to do it again with renovating the port during episode 4 with those plans. But this time he decides to listen to his aide when she says that he needs to follow procedure. Whether he'll stick to that is yet to be seen. Fisk and Vanessa are still having counselling, and it seems as though Vanessa is drifting away from Wilson and doesn't really want to get back together. She feels that the way Fisk both abandoned her and then the way he returned was a betrayal to her, and although she missed him while he was gone, she doesn't know if she wants him back. She explains that it felt like he took half of her with him when he left, and it reminded her of how her dad treated her mum. She didn't ever want to feel like that, but did when Fisk left. But she'd never mentioned any of this to him. Now, with how close they were in the Netflix show, it seems like this had been purely manufactured just to add a bit of drama and tension to their storyline. Obviously, Vanessa was only added in reshoots, so I feel like this was just a rushed way to explain why there are odds and why she hadn't appeared in the previous Disney shows that Fisk had appeared in. There's also been a shift in power dynamics between the two. Obviously, in the Netflix show, Vanessa was more of a supportive character who was being shown more and more of Fisk's world until she was fully involved and was slowly starting to learn how it worked. Then, fast forward into this show, and she's now not only in charge of the business but has made it more profitable and more bulletproof than ever. How? She barely knew how to run it before the end of the Netflix series, and suddenly she's better at running it than Fisk while being less intimidating. Come on. My prediction is that the therapy isn't going to work, they're going to break up, but Vanessa will still try to continue to run the business while Fisk is mayor. However, there could be an issue with that, and that happens at the end of episode 4, where we see that Fisk has actually imprisoned Adam, the man that Vanessa was having an affair with, and has locked him up in what looks like a dungeon. If Vanessa finds out about that, I can imagine she'll be straight out the door. So, just a couple more things I want to mention before we get on to the good stuff. Firstly, there was no Karen again in either of these two episodes. She'll probably appear again towards the end, but I hate how they've dealt with this. Considering during the Netflix series she literally paid Matt's rent for months while he disappeared, it's a bit of a jump to think that she would leave and not speak to him for a year just because he went ghost for a couple of weeks after his best friend died. But that's what they've decided to go with, and instead they've replaced Foggy and Karen with Cherry and Kirsten, two characters with essentially the same purpose but less fleshed out with no emotional connection to the audience. I know they were carried over from what the show was originally meant to be before the reshoots, but I feel it would have been so much better if he had his actual friends around him that he'd already spent 3 seasons with. I would say it'd also free up more time in the show by not having to flesh out new characters, but to be honest, they've not really done much of that anyway, especially with Kirsten. Both her and Cherry have had little bits and bats, but nothing major at all. And finally, I noticed something when rewatching episode 2 which I wanted to mention. So, the young journalist BB Urich, who was the niece of Ben Urich from the original show that Fisk killed, manages to get an interview with Fisk through a young member of his team called Daniel. But when it comes to the interview, she pretty much doesn't ask him any questions. She tells him that she's Ben's niece, obviously not knowing that he killed the man, and then seems to completely misunderstand how an interview's supposed to work. Rather than asking him questions, she tells him that the police commissioner won't answer questions about him, so she feels there's a story behind that, and then starts expositing about how the commissioner's resigning, which will cause a lot of issues for Fisk as a lot of the police force is going to join him. She tells him not to lose the cops or he'll lose the city, and then she gets told to leave. She literally asks him 0 questions and is just there purely as a way for Fisk to find out the commissioner's resigning. It's very lazy writing, if you ask me. And then in episode 4, BB posts an article calling out Fisk for the port renovations that he's planning on doing after Daniel let slip while drinking, so who knows what her motivations are. Right, I think that's enough about the crap stuff. Let's get to the good things. So, unfortunately, there isn't much. Obviously, the acting from Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio is great, along with most of the supporting cast. I've no issues with the performances in this show at all. They've been really good across the board. It's unfortunately just the writing that lets them down. I was also quite happy with the twist at the end of episode 4, showing that Fisk had kidnapped and imprisoned Adam. I feel like Fisk had been watered down and, to be honest, a bit of a bitch compared to Vanessa so far in the show, so it was nice to see that he hadn't changed too much and was still bold enough to go against his wife he loves so much, to essentially torture this man that she had an affair with. I also liked when Vanessa tells Heather, the therapist, that she isn't scared that Fisk will hurt her, and then brings it up in the conversation with Fisk later on, asking whether she should be scared of him. I thought it was some good character work, and shows that Vanessa will still put on a brave face even if she's somewhat unsure herself, but isn't afraid to question Fisk on it either. These few moments in this episode just reminded me of what they were both like in the Netflix shows, so that was very nice to see. I also liked the bit where Fisk had to sit through the school kids singing and We Built This City, with him looking visibly uncomfortable and somewhat pained throughout it before rejecting a second song and running away, while trying to be nice, so I thought that was quite funny as well. Daniel's scene apologising to Fisk after the leak was also well acted, and I liked the fact that Fisk saw the loyalty and courage in him and decided to keep him, but still threatening to kill him if he messes up again. That's definitely something that the Fisk we know would do. Now on to the big one, the Punisher returns. Frank was only in one scene for a few minutes, but it was the best scene in these couple of episodes by a mile. John Bernthal slipped right back into the character, and his character was very consistent with the Netflix shows as well. Frank's gone right back into contract killing by the sounds of it, and seemingly doesn't care that there's copycats of him rolling around New York City and thinks it has nothing to do with him, saying he doesn't have time for Matt's candy-ass hero shit. This leads to him and Matt having a chat where he's trying to convince Matt to carry on being Daredevil because he can see that the guilt's eating him up from Foggy dying, which causes Matt to start crying and realises that Frank's right. This then prompts Matt to get out his gear at the end of the episode and start training on the rooftop. Hopefully that means we'll get to see him suited up in the next episode, because we haven't seen that since the first 15 minutes of the first episode. Overall, I was disappointed with these two episodes, to be honest. I think the series didn't get off to a bad start with the first two, compared to other Disney Plus shows at least, but these two episodes were just a step down for me. A lot of the writing didn't seem to make sense. Fisk and Vanessa's relationship is all over the place when I don't feel like it should be, and the courtroom drama was just terribly written. Still not as bad as She-Hulk, but terribly written. The actors were obviously trying the best, and to be honest, the last 15 minutes or so of episode 4 was pretty good, with the Punisher scene and then Matt suiting up again. But the bad outweighs the good on these two episodes for me, unfortunately. That is the end of my review for episodes 3 and 4 of Daredevil Born Again. If you like the video, please do like and subscribe, and feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. That is everything from me, so thanks very much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.